As a child, the appeal of summer was far more, well, appealing. As an adult, we don't get such luxuries as 3-month vacations from our lives, and what was once revered as the best time of the year, filled with beach days and ice cream and splashing in the pool that someone else cleans, is now just the time of year where you go to work, hot. You scratch and scratch and scratch at all the mosquito bites that slowly drive you closer to insanity, and you wake up in a pool of sweat, not because your mind has gone to the dark place again, but because it's 90 degrees at 4 a.m. Our memories were wrong. Summer sucks. The only thing that stayed constant in this appeal, in its palpability, is the idea and practice of summer reading. Everyone, and welcome back to the Neverland Book Club. Yes, I know it's already spooky season, but it's still over 100 degrees here, so just, okay. This summer, I dove into a number of books that took me on journeys across time and space, to the beyond and back, from contemporary romance to literary fiction to horror to dark academia. I dipped my toes in all the pools available and swam until my metaphorical fingers grew pruny. Though the titles up for discussion today are not all I read this summer, they are some of the more notable ones. Is that good? Is that bad? It's both. It's both. Let's go ahead and get the worst out of the way. Allie, what's going on, girl? Why? Why'd you do this? You were getting better. You were practicing. You were doing so well. What was this? First of all, there's a warning in the beginning. This is considered erotica, is basically what the warning was. Every page of this book. Dry. Erotic? Was that a typo? Not only was the smut in this unsmuttable, but the writing itself. I really, truly want to know the logic behind her stylistic choices. If you've read this book, you know that, like most contemporary romance novels with 2 or more love interests, yes, it's dual POV, but it's not. Because we get the female protagonist's POV, and then the chapters where you'd expect the male protagonist's perspective, it's written in third person. So the book switches from first to third person constantly. Why? What was your reasoning behind choosing that method of storytelling? I genuinely want to know. Am I missing something here? Because as for the plot, I don't remember a lot of it, except the fact that the female main character is very particular about not liking a specific sexual act. She's very adamant about not enjoying this act. She sets her boundaries on it early on and even makes a comment saying, your isn't magical. It's not going to magically cure me from not liking this. And then that act is all they do. They have very vanilla, plain, boring, regular old sex, and it's incredibly anticlimactic, and I am so frustrated. Should I give up? I read every page of this hoping, praying it would get better, and it didn't. I won't go into details about the characters or their motivation or the STEM-adjacent plot because I honestly can't remember a lot of it. What I do remember are the elements of psychology just jammed into the characters, just forced on like tight jeans and the zipper teeth are digging into your skin. From child neglect, sibling trauma, grief, food insecurity, there's too much to the point where we don't actually get to know the characters on a meaningful level. They just become a name with a list of boxes checked. I want to talk specifically about the food insecurity thing for a minute. I thought, hey, something to relate to one of Allie's characters on other than a general career choice. I hate eating in public. I don't enjoy eating with my non-designated people. I will sit at a restaurant and push my food around on the plate, box it up, take it home, and immediately reheat it and eat it on the couch where I am comfortable and frankly starving. Why? I should probably bring that up in therapy one of these days. I don't know why. But Rue, her deal with food insecurity didn't go into much depth about the cause of trauma. It was all pretty surface level, which bothered me, as you can tell. Okay, do I recommend this book to anyone for any reason? If you want. Honest answer, no. If you want to read Ali Hazelwood, read Check and Mate, read Bride, heck, even read Love Hypothesis if you've got the time and don't mind wasting it. But this, I'd put it right next to Love Theoretically in my tier of ranking these books. And as always, I spent way too much time talking about Ali Hazelwood in one of my wrap-ups, and it might as well be just a rant on the whole book. Let's move on before I think of anything else. Will I read her next book? Yes, obviously. I still love her for some reason. It's like an abusive relationship. I keep coming back for more. Anyway, okay. Next, Adultery by Paulo Coelho. This is a book I DNF'd about 10 years ago. Why did I pick it up now after a decade of not thinking about it? It was available on Libby. That's the only reason. I listened to it. It's not that long. It took me about a day's worth of chores and driving to get through it. And although I'm glad for finally finishing it, I'm disappointed all the same. Because this book was pointless. There was no deeper meaning. Everything was laid out on the surface for you to understand at a glance. First of all, it's a woman's POV written by a man, so I'm a little skeptical to begin with. Just saying. And then we get to her reasoning for committing the titled sin, adultery. What's her reasoning? She wanted to. She was bored. Her marriage was less exciting than she thought it would be at this stage, and she felt like throwing a wrench into her life just to spice things up. You know, just girly things. This novel was translated from Portuguese to English, and I tried to keep that in mind while reading the intimate scenes. I can't call them spicy scenes because nowhere in my long and arduous endeavor into the spice world, that's a movie, have I read the anatomically correct names for male and female parts used in a spicy scene, except for this book. It was uncomfortable, sterile, almost instructional. He put it in and then I came. Yes, very lyrical, very captivating. No, and the ending, oh my god. If you enjoy this author's writing, I don't blame you. His other stuff is popular for good reason. The same reason why I believe this title of his is not as well known. Do I recommend? No. Read The Alchemist like everybody else. It's everyone's favorite. What's your favorite book? Oh, The Alchemist. Full Metal Alchemist. Next, The Ministry of Time by... what's her name? By Kellyanne Bradley. This book had everything all at once. Sci-fi adventure, romance, time travel, period drama, thriller, historical fiction. All of it. I listened to this book off Libby, but the whole time I was wondering where the hell would the physical copy be shelved in a store or library. Now, at times this everything all at once genre mashup was fun and delightful, and sometimes it was too much, where I wish characters and scenes had more time to breathe and become their own before moving on to the next bingo card. I found both male and female protagonists charming and witty and fun, while still sometimes dealing with hard topics like colonialism, racism over time, culture shocks, moral dilemmas, things of that nature. Heavy stuff. The writing style is unique and clever, balancing humor with deep reflection on history and identity with a diverse cast, which adds richness to the narrative. As for a solid recommendation, I'd say this is more of a love story above all else. Yes, there are elements of everything I've mentioned, but among them all is this thread that the two characters weave around one another, and that's where the hook lies, I believe. If you're a sci-fi person or a thriller person, you might walk away with a sense of wanting. But if you're a romance person, it can be fun. Moving on. The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. I know, I'm like really late to the game with this one. I believe this was a book talk novel that went viral when it came out, like 5 years ago? So here's the thing. I get why it was popular then, and not so much now. This takes an enemies to lovers trope with a down-on-her-luck female protagonist and shows you that not everything is what it seems on the surface. I will say I hated the beginning. I have a fear of vomit. You guys are getting to know me in this video. I have a fear of eating in public and vomit. And puppets, just to round it off. I hate puppets. And if you've read this book, you know the beginning is just a vomit orgy. And now I've created that image. But once I got past that part and started seeing the very obvious premise, I did enjoy it despite the story being incredibly predictable. There are some misunderstandings and hoodwinks that ensue, and of course the one bed trope as the two protagonists are embarking on their fake honeymoon, and I will say the gradual evolution of the relationship was believable. It wasn't one of those enemies to lover stories where they were never enemies to begin with. Ethan makes fun of Olive, deliberately calling her by similar names rather than her own. The banter is witty, there are funny moments as well as more sentimental scenes, and the story dives into self-discovery as Olive confronts her perceived misfortunes, learning to take control of her own happiness. This was perhaps a deeper take on an otherwise shallow premise, and I think Lauren did well in creating a dynamic that worked among the two characters, as well as the side characters. I look forward to reading more of her stuff. Do I recommend? Yes. For contemporary romance readers, yeah, why not? It's solid. It's good. It's fun. All right, let's talk smut for just a second. Okay, just give me a minute. Just 1 second. The Fake Mate by Lana Ferguson. This was if Grey's Anatomy and The Vampire Diaries were mashed up and acquired by HBO and the people who made Game of Thrones. We got medical drama, we got werewolf anatomy and lore, we got paranormal romance, and we've got so much spice.
Incest?
No incest. No incest. So the Game of Thrones writers will be... Oh. This little book had everything from fake dating, workplace romance, grumpy sunshine, fated mates, wolf shifters, all of it. The cover is so misleading, too, because I had no idea going in that this was a paranormal romance. I thought it was just going to be a cute and cozy medical workplace romance, but then once it started, I couldn't stop reading. This was so much fun. I loved the characters, their motivations, their personality types, and how they came together. The conflicts, though predictable, were still engaging and kept me reading. And the spice was spicy. Have a glass of milk candy. Spicy. I recommend this one for sure. As you can tell, it was so much fun. If you're not familiar with like paranormal romances and monster romances, there was like some nodding involved and...
Nodding?
Nodding. Do you know what nodding is? Do you?
No.
No? Okay, quick lesson. Nodding is specific to monster romances where you wouldn't want to knot me? Okay, next I have more of a recommendation for a specific author rather than one title in particular. Ashley Poston, author of The Dead Romantics, a novel love story, and my personal favorite that I've read so far, The 7-Year Slip. Poston has developed a genre of contemporary/paranormal romance where real-life elements are given a supernatural spin. Each one of her stories are elevated by either the personal abilities of her characters or the impossible situations they find themselves in. Though the common thread are her memorable characters, their personal struggles, and how the narrative doesn't rely on the unexpected parts of the story, but are there as an accent to her already thought out and carefully crafted story from start to finish. Her stories mainly focus on timing. At least that's what I gathered from reading the 3 aforementioned titles. How time can be such a funny thing when you zoom out and look at your life with hindsight. I recommend any one of her titles if you're in the mood for a cozy romance with a hint of don't ask questions magic. That's another thing. The so-called magic in these books is not explained because that's not important. It's there to help the characters and their journey, not the other way around. There's no big world-building info dump needed. Suspend your disbelief, accept the simple rules, and just enjoy the story. Good. Okay, let's take a break from romance for a second and get into some horror. Romance will come back though, I promise. You Like It Darker by Stephen King. That's right. The Mighty King has published yet another title. However, this year, he didn't focus on just one story in particular. He released a collection of short stories with an overall undertone theme of age being the scariest thing of all. Getting old. At least that's what I gathered from the stories. It was never exclusively announced that that was the theme. If I had to recommend just one story from the entire collection, it would have to be Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream. That one was a bit of a wild ride, and it was the longest in the group, if I'm not mistaken. This book was a revisit to old King horror, with references to his older works that were both subtle and in your face. The only thing about this read that cut through all the fun was King's relentless mentions of politics and COVID. I don't know why he can't just let it go. It's been 4 years, and 4 books now, he's written COVID into it. For more broader uses of describing the moral goodness of a character based on who they voted for, to the relentless use of unnecessary descriptions having to do with masks. She was wearing a blue mask, and he was wearing a red mask, and they weren't wearing masks at all. The man pulled his mask down, took a sip of his coffee, pulled the mask back up. I'm not kidding. He used that as action between dialogue more than once. Like, we get it. Please move on. I got so annoyed at one point, I just put the book down for a few weeks and came back to it later when I had the patience for it. I do recommend this for those who enjoy good, short horror stories to read right before bed, but just try and overlook the self-inserted characters and moral judgment King can't seem to help himself from inserting into his stories. Nonetheless, I love him like no other. Don't go telling him I said anything, okay? I love him. Next, we have an old favorite, A Wild Sheep Chase by Haruki Murakami. I hadn't read Murakami since January of 2023, and I pinch myself for letting so much time go by without it. This was like any other Murakami read, seemingly meaningless, with strange and unrealistic characters on the surface, only to understand the reason behind everything more spiritually after you put the book back on the shelf. Murakami is a master of self-discovery, of self-destruction, perhaps unknowingly in the name of reconstruction. His characters are almost always found right before their lowest points, becoming the makers of their own demise just to realize being lost is exactly what they needed. I'd say the magical realism elements in this novel in particular are a bit more than his normal dose, but it works for the story. It has that same Murakami creepiness that's so subtle, it just drips into your dreams without your knowledge, because it's not in your face creepy. It's sprinkled throughout the pages in a way you don't notice right away. And I love that. A Wild Sheep Chase wasn't my favorite story of Murakami's. I would say it actually has more of his misogynistic tendencies when it comes to portraying his female characters as objects for the male characters to enjoy before they're just lost. Tossed away. You know how he's always misplacing women in his story, like, where'd she go? And then she was never seen again, and we don't want to think about it. Not that they're in the wrong place, but that they literally just disappear or go missing. And yes, he is problematic for that. So if you can set that aside, his writing style, just the overall vibe of his work, is worth some attention. And he has like a little baby face. I love his face. I won't spend too much time on this next one, but I thought it was worth mentioning in this video. Butcher and Blackbird, followed by Leather and Lark by Bryn Weaver. I heard of these books from a coworker. She said, "Hey, I just read these really nasty, shocking, completely outspoken, violent, smutty as hell books, and I thought of you. They seem right up your alley." And she meant these. And she was right. I enjoyed every outrageous moment of these books. Listening to them was the right call. That Irish male narrator, very good. The production of the audiobook was also better, in my opinion, than others. It wasn't exactly a graphic audio production, but the male and female narrators did the voices of other male and female characters during other chapters, if that makes sense. That way we don't get that ridiculous low-pitched male voice when the female narrators are trying to do the male lines, or the high-pitched male voices trying to sound feminine, you know? You know.
It's me, Jessica! I'm in here!
Even when someone was laughing or sighing or their screams were muffled, you hear all of that, and for me, that just elevated the experience. I recommend these if you have a strong stomach. There's some body gore and overall just disgusting things going on. Familiarize yourself with the trigger warnings before diving in. But if you're as cool with all of that as I was, have at it, you filthy animal, and have fun. Okay, back to regular old romance real quick. Funny Story by Emily Henry. For me, in the past, Emily Henry has always been a definite read, but not something I drop everything I'm currently reading to pick up. Something I wish I had done with this one. I regret not reading this one sooner. This was the perfect Emily Henry book. Everything that I felt her previous novels may have lacked, this provided. Almost like fan service, but not so cheap. It was as though someone who's read and understood every Emily Henry book and took into consideration the hype behind the author and the online book community took notes, practiced the craft for years, and came out with this. I describe this as a light romance, forced proximity, friends to lovers, opposites attract, wonderfully paced, slow burn. The chemistry between Daphne and Miles is real. You can feel it. You believe it in the timeline as they both deal with a shared trauma experience. And you might have thought the same thing I did while reading. They're just rebounding with one another. They both got heartbroken and found someone who was just there, convenient, close, and there's nothing more beneath the surface. Emily Henry takes all your doubts and uses humor and a heartwarming kind of tenderness to heal the two characters both individually and mutually. The emotional depths this story possessed, while still making it witty and engaging, it was truly enjoyable and memorable. Out of all her novels, this one is by far my favorite. It was more than just a funny story. And last, but definitely not least, the Atlas Complex? Yes. There are 3 of them, and I can never remember which one's which, but this is the 3rd, the final installment in the Atlas 6 series by one of my favorite authors of all time who ever wrote a word, Olivia Blake. I understand why not everyone enjoys Blake's writing style or her stories. If I had to describe her novels in a word, it would be between rich and dense. I couldn't actually choose one word. Rich with lyrical prose, complex characters, deep emotional, psychological, and philosophical conflicts, and dense with plot, with moral struggles, with overall world-ending narrative. It would be too much to try and explain the story or the characters to you here in this video, but I will say This series leans heavily on character dynamics, relationships that drive the plot. Flawed and real characters that all have their own parts to play, their own struggles to face, and overcome while dealing with their own toxic ambition. The desire for knowledge and control of more than just themselves leads some characters to betrayal, murder, and the demise of those closest to them. A common critique of these novels is that there's no solid central conflict. There's a presented quest, we'll say for lack of a better word, a shared objective, if you will, but it's not the driving force for the characters. Their own philosophies drive them. Ultimately, the story is less about the stakes and more about personal reflection in the face of those stakes. The confrontation so few of us are willing to have with ourselves and those that have shaped who we are. All of that to say, this is a beautiful and intricate story with a character-driven narrative that focuses on interpersonal dynamics more than anything else. And it was an absolute pleasure to read. Those are all the titles I'll speak on today, though I do have a few honorable mentions I'd like to mention. I recommend all of these for readers of their respective genres. Let's just rapid fire these real quick. Life's Too Short by Abby Jimenez, and anything else written by her. What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez, and A Sorcerer Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher, and I will definitely be reading more from her. There were others, but these I felt needed a quick little spotlight. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you're not. Today's shout out goes to Mercedes7151. I got a lot of nice comments on my last video, even though it was quite a while back. I love and appreciate the engagement, but this little comment, do you have any idea what this did for my little booktuber ego? Thank you for that. I'm off to go start prepping for NaNoWriMo this year because it is fast approaching and I have plans. Oh, do I have plans? Will I make another video before that starts? Who knows? We'll see. Stay lost, keep reading.